North Carolina State Highway Patrol.
What cigarette do you smoke, Doctor?
A contributing factor to our juvenile delinquency of today.
Rock and roll has got to go.
And welcome back to the Hometown Holler. I'm Daniel Ayers.
And I'm Quinn Ray.
Well, hey, man.
All right, I got a quick story for you.
Okay, I like them.
About my cousin.
Okay.
All right. This is, I saw him the other day, and I just started thinking about this story. Back in high school, he used to work down in Farrington at the, not at the house restaurant, but at the Granary, which is like the cafe in the Farrington village. And one day he got up to go to work and put on his shoes, and there was something squishy in his shoe. But he had like new insoles or something, so like he didn't like read too much into it.
Doesn't have kids.
Doesn't have kids, no. So but this is also high school, so like
It didn't smell.
No, it didn't smell, so it's good to go, right? So
Sure.
So he goes to work and he comes home, and come to find out, there was a snake that was in his shoe when he put his shoe on.
A snake in my boot.
As nightmare fuel.
So
Yes.
it is nightmare fuel, right? It
Very.
is nightmare fuel. But the snake, I mean, he squished it, right?
Yeah.
So the snake, no moss. But I mean, you got it. So from then on, he told his coworkers about it, and they called him Woody because there was
Fair.
a snake in his boot.
Yeah. Did he just start writing his name on the bottom of his shoes?
He didn't get that far into the bit.
Okay,
No.
okay. Fair enough.
Did you have a nickname in high school? I'm just curious what your.
Oh, well, not in high school, but in middle school, it was Quinn the Queer.
Not Quinn the Eskimo.
No,
they
that
just went
didn't
straight for
happen.
the double Q?
It wasn't a chosen nickname.
No,
it wasn't
clearly.
a nickname that I put
was
on
a
the back
given
of my.
nickname.
Yeah, it was given. It had long hair.
Was it at least like a term of endearment?
Well, see, I thought I was being real cute. You know, this was like 6th grade and stuff, and I was like,
Sixth
"Yeah,
grade.
I'm queer. That means weird."
Right.
And I just like leaned into it. Yes. But no, not really. It was just Quinn works.
Well, you got him, man.
Yeah, I got him.
Yeah.
Well, Blair, you're a hiker. Do you have like a hiker trail name?
I do have a trail name.
Do you mind sharing it? Is that
I do-
public information?
I do mind sharing it.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
that belongs on the AT.
Okay. So I have a friend who went on the AT, and his trail name was Bob Ross.
I love that.
Because
For him.
he on the AT, you know how you overpack when you hike?
Sure.
He had these visions of like, I'll wake up at like the crack of dawn and like go to the cliffside and like paint watercolor postcards that I can send back home. And he carried this giant like 32-piece easel and set.
Newbie move.
Never used it.
Yeah.
Ditched it at like the first, rest point. So Bob Ross.
Yeah, the big joke up in Virginia is you go down to Damascus, where it's a big spot. A lot of through hikers will stop there.
The Creeper Trail goes through there.
Creeper Trail goes through there. It's a great town.
It is a
honestly.
great
You
town.
go down there during the season, but by that point, a lot of people have already chucked all their stuff. Like people chuck all their stuff. Northern Georgia, Nantahala, like that kind of area. But in Damascus, you can get lots of great hiker shit for next to nothing. That's also where a lot of people bail out. So,
And it's only like 400 miles in, so it's still got plenty of life.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be thinking this whole episode what your name is, and I'll guess it at the end.
You do that.
I'll give it a
a
good
challenge.
guess.
I'll let you know.
Okay, yeah, fair.
Well, folks, we're very blessed here at the Hometown Holler to have friends that will call us back and hang out a second time.
Yes.
I'm just saying, I don't take anything for granted, all right?
That's
In
right.
the year of our Lord 2025, I don't take anything for granted.
People flipping parties, moving,
right.
becoming unaffiliated now.
But the friend we have today is someone who's been a true friend and inspiration, I will say personally. Blair Reeves, who's the founder and one of the directors of Carolina Forward. He was our season finale last year.
That's right. Many of y'all saw him on there and listened to our episode, and you also might see him on your Instagram and TikTok and stuff. He's got that nice chiseled chin that everybody looks for at 6:30 in the morning, where they always drop.
6:15, I think.
6:50 actually.
6:50.
We publish at 6:50 on Mondays and Wednesdays.
All right.
Monday, Wednesday.
5:50 Central.
We A/B tested that, by the way. 7:15, 7:30. Yeah, 6:50 was the sweet spot.
Never should have told us.
There you go.
6:49.
Exactly. And
Fuck you, Blair.
That's right. We'll have the last laugh. And like any good friend, Blair brought the bourbon.
There you go.
Yeah.
No, you didn't expect me to do this sober, did you?
No, of course not.
We did not. No, we sure did not.
That's a self problem, Daniel, not an our problem.
Well, let's dive in. Folks who I think want to know more about like our last last episode, the last one that you were on in November, it was literally right after the election. Yep. So it was kind of like an autopsy on 2024. It was a little bit about Carolina Forward. Yep. You introduced you coined the term Waffle House Democrat, which is a great term.
That's me.
That's the party that we all want to belong to.
What is your standing order, Waffle House, Daniel?
Man, I'm just like hash browns and like sunny side up with toast.
You're right, Mark Walker over there. You got nothing on it.
I'm typically vegetarian. Like if I go to your house and you've like made me a meal with me, like I'll eat that. But like if I'm ordering for myself, it's gonna be like at Waffle House. It's gonna be just like sunny side up with toast. I want to sop it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No waffle?
I mean, maybe I'll get a waffle, but I just love eggs. I love eggs.
They're offering like new stuff in the waffle now. So
I did not know that.
You can do chocolate chips. You can do these little like caramel chips. You can do all kinds of like the kids today don't know what they're missing. I grew up with the Waffle House that was like. Well, so today it's like a well lit family eating establishment.
Yes.
Yeah. That's like the way they branded themselves.
It's smoking cigarettes while they're cooking.
That was not the Waffle House I grew up. I grew up in like these smoky, greasy truckers bar by the interstate, and
that's
fine by me. Yeah.
Yes.
There's like one guy who just pulled in from Philly, and he's putting quarters in to hear Billy's got his beer goggles on. Yeah,
he's like crying into his mug.
Exactly. That's the Waffle House. It's a cathedral for the common man.
Couple people fighting in the bathroom or whatever.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, there you go.
So for this conversation, I mean, we can cover any ground you want to cover, but I think Quinn and I were chatting, and we think it'd be a good idea for us to see if we could make this, we might have some listeners who are new to North Carolina, new to North Carolina politics, and if we could kind of just like bring them up to speed, not so much in like the past, I don't know, 12 months, but maybe like 15 years.
Oh yeah, that's
bird's eye view.
No challenge there. Yeah.
You're not intimidated?
I feel like there's a lot of people don't pay a lot of attention to state politics generally.
Yeah.
And like through no fault of their own. Like, it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
Because everything is nationalized now. We've had this whole die off of like state media, local media, regional media, whatever else. And so even if you are the kind of person who wants to know what's going on, unless you live in an area with a really kind of well-resourced and well-staffed kind of local news organization, which is very, very rare.
You should share the holler with your friends.
There you go. Well, it's hard to do. People who grow up in North Carolina don't know anything about North Carolina politics. A lot of people we do a lot of opinion polling. A lot of people can't name the three branches of government. They don't know what those are.
It's funny because we get DMs with a lot of questions, and some of them are pretty basic. Intro to
and
NC
that's
politics.
fine. I want people to do that.
No,
yes,
it's awesome.
yes,
I encourage it. If you're listening and you have a question, like DM us, we'll answer it.
No question's stupid.
I mean, like some questions, somebody will be like, I don't know who my state rep is. And it's funny because my gut reaction will be like, well, of course your state rep in House District 13 is blah, blah, blah.
No, it's impossible to know.
But what's hilarious is like, I would have known that like a year and a half ago. I'm a newcomer to this too, right?
Yeah.
So like
80%, research shows that in every state, 80% of Americans have no idea who represents them in their state legislature. Because why would it's impossible? The lines are all crazy and they change all the time.
Getting ready for this show, like I think we're going to talk about how North Carolina politics have changed since 2010, right?
Yeah.
Big pivotal year for North Carolina.
It was a big year.
So 2010, that midterm, that would have been my second election that I would have been able to vote in. And moving forward, and I was just looking at it, and I was like, man, I didn't know that shit either.
Yeah.
I didn't, I voted. I had a party that I liked. But I didn't know who, Pat McCrory was. I didn't know who my representatives were. And I felt like I knew some of politics because I listened to national politics. So I know
who Barack Obama is.
Right.
I know who, who are the fuck.
Right. Joe Biden.
Yeah.
I knew him at the time.
I remember in 2010, I mean, I feel like we're kind of getting into it now, right? Because that's the year, that's like the point of singularity from which I think you can trace. You can kind of follow the thread back to 2010 in a lot of ways, right? Before 2010, North Carolina was predominantly a Democratic state, especially for statewide offices. Now, that doesn't mean we were a liberal state. Very important to point that out.
Yes.
Within the Democratic Party in North Carolina, you had lots of factions.
But it was the first time since Reconstruction that North Carolina had Republican-led majority in the House and the Senate.
Right. And also worth pointing out, the Republican Party that held it during Reconstruction was very different than the Republican Party that took control of it in 2010.
That's right.
So just worth pointing that out. But before 2010, North Carolina, we'd had Republican governors were the exception. Republican-controlled legislatures were not rare, I would say, but just like we're not the norm.
Yeah.
And then suddenly we have Republican-controlled Senate, Republican-controlled House, and then we get Pat McCrory in 2012.
Yeah, one of the things that the way people understand North Carolina politics today is totally defined by 2025 and really the last like 10 years, 15 years, or whatever. You go back into the 20th century, 90s, 80s, 70s, whatever. What a lot of people don't understand today, because we live in this world of total partisan polarization and very deep partisan polarization.
You pull blue lever or you pull red lever.
Right.
Yes.
It's a cultural phenomenon. It's everything else. What people don't understand is that one, that's not always the case. North Carolina effectively did not have a organized statewide Republican Party until the 1980s.
Really?
It basically did not exist until you had Jesse getting elected in 1970.
Himself a former Democrat.
He was a former Democrat, became a Republican, but he got elected. But he's getting elected at the same time that Democrats are putting up Saddam Hussein numbers in the legislature, like 60, 70, 80% of the vote totals were Democrats, because it just wasn't a thing in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s even, to vote, in a bunch of different ways. So the Republican Party in North Carolina is essentially just Jesse Helms. He personally built the Republican Party in North Carolina. Into the 80s, the Republicans are getting 20%, 25%, 30% of the statewide vote total, all votes for the state house or the state senate in North Carolina. So people talk about, the Democrats gerrymandered for it. They didn't gerrymander shit.
Right.
Because there was no Republican Party. Now, then you hit into the 90s.
They weren't gerrymandering with like surgical precision.
You didn't have to. First of all, you couldn't really do it. They didn't have computers.
Yeah.
Right. So these are guys with the big drafts tables of maps.
Right.
And, all the whatever like your grandpa does. 94 comes. Right, that's Clinton's first midterm when they got wiped out. You had Newt Gingrich, all that sort of stuff. The Republicans, for the first time in over a century, they win a majority. They won a majority for the first time of votes cast for our state house, and that meant they also won a majority of the state house. It wasn't very gerrymandered; they just weren't winning those votes before. But that year, they won a majority of our state house, and they held it for 4 years before the Democrats won it back. In 2001, the Democrats gerrymandered the legislature, and you got to be really clear about that. Like, they did do that. It was a soft gerrymander, but it was a gerrymander.
Sure.
2000, then they go into court, a bunch of litigation happens, yada yada yada. 2003, under court order, they redraw the maps again, and 2003 is really important because 2003 was the last time any Democrat in North Carolina for the last 22 years. Not a single Democrat has drawn any election map at all in North Carolina since 2003. That was the last year they did it.
There's a factoid.
Some of our listeners aren't even that old. Just saying.
Yeah, if you were born, there are people who are voting today who have never who will not be
under a Democratic map.
Yeah, exactly. So 2010 happens, Obama's first midterm, that all happens. They redraw the maps. We're getting to a point now, and I did the math at one point, but we're going to get to the point later on in the 20s.
They didn't just redraw the maps; they blew the whole thing up in 2010.
Well, they blew the whole. So you had map drawing technology in 2011 that you did not have in 2001, let alone 1991. They were able to do this in a very purposeful kind of way. We know exactly what they did because there are consultants out there you can pay to help you draw a gerrymander for the Republicans. There's those on the Democrats as well. They hired the Republican guy, Hofstadter. They found his files later on. This whole side quest drama around this guy. He died. His daughter finds all his files where he's giving Republican leaders options. Do you want to gerrymander this many black people? Do you want to disenfranchise Latinos? Do you want to disenfranchise women? Do you want to do it
like a
this
buffet
way
of
or that?
racism?
Yes, and the state Republican Party of North Carolina sued to seal those files, to shut them down, so they wouldn't see the light of day. They failed in that.
Release them.
His daughter just put it out there. It's all public record. You can go to Google that stuff today. They still held the seats. So we've been living under that gerrymander of 2011 since then. and it's the Republicans in Raleigh have run their agenda. Right. And,
Sure.
And today, the thing that we're seeing now is that they're kind of struggling to come up with what else to do because they have run their agenda. North Carolina is the test bed for a lot of the stuff you've seen happen. They've dropped the tax rates, they flattened the tax code, they gutted the regulatory process of the government. It's really hard for Republicans in North Carolina now to run on a change agenda. So everything you hear, the schools are like this, the environment is like this. Why is this like this? It's like that because
you made it that way, bro. You did that.
It's the meme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's like at Subway. If you don't like the sandwich, bro, you made the sandwich.
That's right. That's right.
There's no way you get around that. And the only way you get around that is that people just don't know. People don't know that Republicans have been in control of everything because you had, Governor Roy Cooper. He was in power for 8 years. People hear his name a lot. And they're like, well, he must be running stuff. People blame the DMV on Cooper.
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, Roy Cooper had nothing to do with the DMV. The DMV is funded and managed, and what it can do is set by the General Assembly. The General Assembly is controlled by Republicans. That continues to be the case today. There you go.
Yeah, and all we did was, like, once Cooper came in, the GA still got to do whatever they wanted to do.
That's right.
Cooper would veto, and they would override the veto. And then what was it, 2018, 2020, around in that time when we broke the supermajority,
I want to say
had a veto.
he had, 3 or 4 years? No, it's maybe 2 or 3 years.
Out of
2 or
8.
3 years.
Yeah.
Where he could just hold the line, right? It's not putting policies.
Where he had a veto.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, one thing I think is really important for anyone to understand about North Carolina politics, this might be like square one, which is that our governor is super weak.
Yeah.
Our governor, and that is not an insult by any means. That is political science.
That's not a comment on.
No.
Right.
That is an observation of how our system is designed here in North Carolina.
Most people assume that we have a miniature version of the federal government.
Yeah.
Right.
At the state level.
And a lot of states do have that. You come from another state, your governor is appointing the commissioner of agriculture, the commissioner of labor.
In most states.
Yeah, in most states, right? Your governor has a line item veto. So if there's a crazy budget bill and the governor says, oh, that's a horrible idea, they can cross that out, but keep the rest of the budget, or of the bill. North Carolina governor didn't have that.
And they continue to strip more. They
there's
did it.
so many levels to this too, because we rewrote our state constitution in 1973. We had a piece on our blog not too long ago talking about how if you were to revision the state government and the state constitution, how would you do that? But we rewrote our state constitution in 1973, and you know who's involved in that? Then state senator, if I'm not mistaken, Roy Cooper. He was involved in doing that.
In 73.
No. He was 93, I believe, is what. I think what you're referring to.
Okay, fuck. I'll just strike all
No.
that.
There's your line item veto. The early 90s, there was a. I don't remember the exact. I'm not going to.
You're right. He couldn't have possibly been there in 73.
Right. Couldn't have been there.
But in the early 90s, he was part of legislation that, and I don't remember exactly what the verbiage was, but it did kind of rein the powers of the executive back in.
Yes,
I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was I think it was 93.
That's
you were
right,
off a little bit. But
73 wouldn't make any sense. So we'll just strike.
Well, the reason I remember is because it impacted Jim Hunt.
Yeah, exactly.
Jim Hunt. Fun fact, seasoned listeners of the Holler will remember, distant cousin of mine.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
In the year 2000, we had the
you
family
told us
reunion at
earlier.
the governor's mansion.
Yeah. And what I like to tell people is that, we're so baked into this mentality now of Team Red, Team Blue, that people don't like to talk about this a lot. But back in the 90s, back in the, under the Democrats, there was a lot of corruption in the General Assembly.
It was a machine.
Politics.
I mean, and you had Jim Black. He went to jail. But that was the thing. There was a lot of corruption, but the people who got busted for corruption went to jail.
Meg
That's
Scott
right.
Phipps, a commissioner of agriculture, went
There
to
you
jail.
go. Yeah,
went to prison.
Easily. A lot of bad stuff in his administration as well. And the difference between that and today is that the stuff going on in Raleigh today, no one goes to jail over.
That's right.
And no one is ever investigated. And this is the big thing that I think that a lot of people need to better understand is that the level and the problem of corruption today in our General Assembly is actually far, far worse than most people really realize. It is an order of magnitude worse than it was even 10 years ago under Republican rule. But let alone 20 years ago, let alone 30 years ago, the corruption is gotten completely out of control to the point where you have people, there are lawmakers in our General Assembly right now who take money for votes. They accept favors, jobs, gifts from national partners, state level partners. There is money being exchanged, and everybody knows about it. And I can't mention names because that would get me sued. But everyone knows exactly who it is, and nothing happens.
But what can they do about it, right? So you saying that, like, I have a lot of buddies in a group chat, and they think they're political, and they're really not. Like, I'm the political guy in the chat, and they're like, that comment right there, like, duh, Quinn, like, they're politics. That's what happens. We all know that already.
Right.
What do you think when you say you want people to understand? I feel like they understand that that's happening, but what do they do about it?
Well, can I connect some dots real quick? Because we're
Like
talking
Pee Wee
about
Herman, connect
that's right.
the
We're
dots,
gonna
la 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 la.
You know, I'm not really a Pee Wee Herman guy. I'm just gonna.
Oh man,
sorry.
We were talking about LSD earlier. I watched that.
So the dots I want to connect is, we're talking about corruption in 2025, right? And this, I'm gonna connect this back to 2010, right? The Republicans take control of our state government.
I'm excited
Because if you control our General Assembly, you control our state government, really.
Right.
And they draw the maps that allow them to maintain control of the General Assembly. And what the dots I'm connecting here is that when you don't have competitive races, when you don't have turnover in offices, right? When you have people who know that they're going to be reelected by comfortable margins, and they don't have to campaign, they don't really even have to read the bill necessarily.
You have nincompoop screaming term limits.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that is jet fuel for corruption, right?
So what you're getting at, Daniel, is the first of, I said there's their first and second and third order effects of gerrymandering.
And that's the first.
That is the first order effect of gerrymandering, is the obvious one. You gerrymander the maps, you're going to win a majority, right?
Every time.
And that's it. The maps are frozen for 10 years under our state constitution, which, by the way, the North Carolina State Supreme Court broke that provision of our Constitution when they forced a redraw in 2023. That's a whole other kind of story. But yeah, the first order of gerrymandering is, you win the General Assembly.
You lock that in.
And it's locked in for a decade. Nothing you can do about it. 85% of the seats in the entire legislature, House and Senate, are completely non-competitive. You could take a nap. It doesn't matter. You're going to win, and there it is. So all Republicans have to do is, there's no question of whether they're going to win a majority. The question is whether they're going to win a supermajority. Back in 2013, they could safely draw themselves a supermajority, and they can't do that anymore because there's been a voter realignment. They have to fight for a supermajority now. They can't even win a supermajority on a fresh gerrymander now. They have to focus on people like Tricia Cotham switching parties, corrupt bargain there, to do that, and that doesn't really work anymore. So that's the first level. You just win a majority. Now think about exactly like you just said. Once you don't have to worry about winning a majority, and most of your members don't have to worry about any competitive race, what happens? Right? Well, you're going to have a lot of corruption. People who the only election they have to worry about is a party primary. The craziest, most ideological people in your neighborhood are the ones who decide who the representative is going to be. And those people are going to choose some real wackadoodles. And that's why we have a lot of wackadoodles.
So we had Mark Robinson.
There you go.
Michelle Morrow.
We have a guy in the legislature now who started a spanking business.
He would come to your house and spank you?
It was about spanking children.
That sounds like
actually.
okay.
What's it called? Oh, never mind. Not interested anymore. Never mind. That's weird.
Man, okay.
That's weird.
All your listeners can just Google "spank that tail" and they can find out the whole thing about it. Yeah.
How am I just now
I
hearing
know.
about this?
Oh yeah. I'll tell you the whole story.
God, that's weird.
You have
Very weird.
So you have guys in the legislature. So Tim Moore is a great example.
Yeah.
Former House Speaker, brazenly, wantonly corrupt. The big joke, he's from Cleveland County. The big joke down in Cleveland County is Tim Moore went to Raleigh driving a Mazda. He came back driving a Maserati. And it's true. He's become a multimillionaire on a $14,000 a year state legislator salary, and by being extremely corrupt. And nothing happened. And so over time, they have dismantled the systems of oversight and accountability. If you file a complaint that goes to a thing called the State Ethics Commission that now is deadlocked, votes either way, so nothing ever happens there. All investigations are secret and confidential, and never find out anything that happens anywhere. So that's kind of
That's the second order.
The second order is corruption, right?
So first is you lock in that majority. Second order effects of gerrymandering is you get kind of corrupt, do nothing.
Well, corrupt and extreme, right?
Right.
Corrupt
Okay.
and
Yeah. Mhm.
The third order is a really interesting one. Now think about if you are Duke Energy, or you're the banks in Raleigh, you're the healthcare associations, the hospitals, the bar association, the universities, all the different industry and trade groups. There's this whole constellation of interest.
You got to get good with the politicians.
Interest and special interest and stakeholders in Raleigh who really, really care about what happens in the legislature.
Yeah.
What happens there? Well, their staff, not only the lobbyist shops, all the lobbyist shops, all the law firms, to advance and to make anything happen there, you can't be a Democrat anymore. You have to be a Republican. So they all hire Republicans. If you're a Republican staff there, you advance. If you're a Democrat, you don't. And if you are a party leader, if you're a Republican Party leader in the General Assembly, there are obviously different degrees of aggressiveness you can go with here.
Sure.
Right? You can say, well, you're a lobbyist for this group. I know you guys work with the Democrats, but you mostly with the Republicans because we're the majority. We'll still work with you here. Or you can say, go fuck yourself, go take a hike, and we're going to work with you once you fire this guy. And that's what they've done. That's what Phil Berger does.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of the leaders, the majority of leaders in the Senate and the House and the leadership there are different levels of aggressiveness they use in different groups. You can be more aggressive on the little guys than you can be with Duke Energy and with the Chamber of Commerce, but you can still be pretty aggressive with them because they need something from you.
Look what they're doing to the Teachers Association.
Exactly.
Good point.
That is institutional Raleigh becomes redder, becomes much more conservative. That's why the whole PAC community, the political action community in Raleigh, very aggressively supportive of Republicans. What a lot of people don't realize is that the PACs give to who the party leadership tells them to give to. So if you sell plastics or whatever the fuck you sell in Raleigh.
Plastics.
One
word, Benjamin. Plastics. All right, that's The Graduate.
It's the future.
That's right.
That missed like half your audience. Right there.
No, look, man. Of course, I've seen The Graduate, but that's the quote in Civilization 5 when you discover plastics as their technology.
I thought that's what you were referring to.
That's okay. There you go. Good, excellent. Okay, cool. A true Civ player. Yeah. One word, Benjamin. Plastics.
If you're that guy, you don't just give Mr. Representative, Mr. Republican Senator, or whatever money. You go to the caucus leadership. And you say the Republican leadership, and you say who should I give money to? Who should I be supportive of? I have this bill I care a lot about, and they say, well, X, Y, and Z. Go talk to them. You max out to them, and then you get a meeting. There is literally an entry fee, an ante.
Pay to play.
And by the way, under Republican rule, the amount spent
is that wrong?
Is it in what sense?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If somebody donates to my campaign, I'm going to meet with you.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
I think that that is kind of the question, right? Which is like, well, is this is so and so upset about this because it's just the other team doing it?
Yeah.
I don't feel that way. And the reason I don't feel that way is because the folks doing this is a real fox guarding the henhouse situation, right? I might be willing to tolerate some degree of cooperation. Let's call it, you want to call it corruption, whatever. If it was the case that we had people in Raleigh who were actually working on behalf of our institutions and our society, but the reality is we have people administering our public schools, or at least I'm talking about the General Assembly here, not Mo Green, but we have people overseeing how much money our public schools get who don't believe in public education. Right. We have people overseeing our criminal justice system who don't care how many black people we lock up. Right. Like it's so, in terms of like, what is it, just politics? It would be if these were people who on some level were guided by a commitment to the greater good, but they're not. They are either like, I think Tim Moore, I never met the guy, but just his MO strikes me as somebody who, kind of in the Trump mold, really, really likes shiny things, really out for himself, really is going to Raleigh for Tim Moore. You got folks like him. Then you have folks like
Trisha Cotham is too.
Trisha Cotham's another example of somebody who I think is in it for Trisha Cotham. But then you have folks like...
No, she's in it for Tim Moore.
Possibly. Well, yeah, that's well played.
Who can say?
Who can say? But then you have folks like Keith Kidwell, who I think are genuinely
He's just a conservative dude.
fanatics. I think conservative is like that is like polite.
Oh, he's an extremist.
He is an extremist, right? And so to answer your question, Quinn, the reason I take issue with it is not necessarily because of the thing that's happening. It's because the people participating are people I consider to be enemies of a free,
I think it's the
and
aftermath,
healthy society.
right? I think it's not the issue of people getting a meeting.
Right.
It's what comes after that meeting, what
Right.
they do, what the policies
Is it a
and stuff
quid
they
pro
do.
quo?
Right.
So like the steelman argument here, and what the lobbyists will say is that, like, look, you sell plastics,
Yeah.
right? You have a vested interest in what happens in the legislature. And by the way, most voters have no idea and don't care. Like maybe there's a state law that changes like the mixture of whatever you can put in plastics that might save you some money or whatever.
You lost me at mixture.
Exactly. And none of us have any idea.
Right,
Right.
exactly, yeah,
and so
yeah.
what the lobbyists will say, and which I have a little bit of sympathy. I understand where they're coming from with the argument is to saying, look, we are subject matter experts. We can actually tell you what is good, what is
Sure.
bad, we have knowledge you don't. And that I kind of understand. The problem is that obviously the optics are very bad.
Yes, optics terrible.
The optics are that there's a quid pro quo. You give me money, I do things for you in office, and that's what people fucking hate,
Yeah.
right?
I think everybody does.
But again, under a gerrymander, it doesn't matter. They're not going to lose their majority, so
Right.
So they can do it brazenly.
And that's why every year under Republican control, the amount spent on lobbying in our legislature has gone up. From 2022 to 2023, there was a 20% jump. Wow. From a majority to a supermajority. Lobbying spend went up. There's like $80 million spent every year lobbying the North Carolina legislature, and it's all going to the Republican caucus, and it's because the entry fee keeps going up.
That is insanity.
The fee keeps going. The ante keeps going up.
So is the answer Republicans have to, if people are upset, they're a Republican, Meemaw's a Republican, she doesn't like everything she just heard. Yeah. Is it, Meemaw, you got to vote Democrat next go round? Or is it not vote? Like, how does it?
I don't know if Meemaw's going to do that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I think that's a hard ask for people. And look, I have some sympathy here because, like, look, North Carolina is a pretty purple state. There are a lot of conservative people in our state, and I have sympathy with that, right? Like, so you talk about Keith Kidwell. I actually think I think he's an extremist. I think his politics are noxious, and I don't agree with it. But you know what? Think about Keith Kidwell. I think he does.
He represents his district.
He represents his district, and I think he's principled.
Sure.
I think he believes in some shit.
I will agree with that, and that's why I distinguish him from like the Tim Moores, who I think Tim Moore will make any deal for any reason as long as Tim
There are
Moore gets the
lots
shiny
of guys.
object.
The perfect example is the casinos.
Yeah, casinos. Let's go there.
Right, the casinos, right? So there's all this stuff out there, how like they just took a bunch of money from the sports betting industry and just said, like, we're going to cram this down everyone's throat. And they almost got away with it. Like the Cordish, the Cordish company, they went and bought land. They bought off county commissioners. They bought off a bunch. The big joke in Raleigh at one point was that, like, there were more lobbyists for casinos in the legislature than there were lawmakers for a while.
And what are they doing? Just like taking them to lunch, buying them watches? Like what?
Going
what
to
is
Kentucky,
this?
bourbon.
What? Well, they took some of them over to Louisville.
Yeah.
Right. They flew some of them probably over to. There was a group that went to Paris to the Olympics.
That's right. I forgot about the Paris group. Yeah.
And by the way, the stuff we know about is the tip of the iceberg. I am not kidding.
Well, it's like cockroaches, right?
Exactly.
If you see 3, then you have 3,000.
I'm not kidding when I say there was money exchanged.
Yeah.
And
wild.
not a little bit of money and not a couple of lawmakers, a lot of them. And we'll never know the full extent of a lot of it. And there's no one will ever go to jail.
Yeah, it's something you said, Quinn, that I do want to clarify. Like, under a fair map situation, we're going to have folks from every part of the political spectrum, right? Like, an ideal North Carolina to me does not mean an ideologically pure North Carolina. No. It means an ideologically diverse North Carolina. Because like you were saying, Blair, like, you're going to have districts that are just super MAGA. There's no, and that is.
Look, have you been to Cartwright County?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I think he's Jones County. Or maybe he's Carteret.
we'll
But yes, no, you're right. I mean, exactly. Yeah.
But I think if Democrats ever win in North Carolina and break it and able to draw the maps, they gerrymander the shit out of it, spike the football, then get a third person to draw it and just let it roll.
You're saying that's what you want, or what's going to happen, or both?
Well, that's what I think should happen, because I've always had this moral conflict, right? Like people on the left have this moral compass type feeling.
Right.
And
they go low,
higher.
we go high.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, if we ever get in office, because we say we don't want it both ways, this is how it should be. I don't think that. I think once we get it, we hit it hard for 10 years, because nobody gives a shit. And I say that with the most respect to the listeners and to people that do it, but we have went so crazy the last 15 years in North Carolina. It is going to take honest people that we trust and like on the left, right? Like the Jeff Jacksons, right? People like him, think he's honest. I think he's fair. I think he's moral. I think he's principled. To have 10 years in office to try to get this recovered, opposed to just being like, you know what? They gerrymandered us, but I'm going to give Tim Moore a fair district. No, bump that guy. Screw him. No. For 10 years, and then afterwards give it to a third party, let him do it.
I have sympathy for that point of view. I think that realistically, what I think is going to happen is that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I think that's exactly what would have happened. Mm-hmm. Where we are right now, you look at the coalitions, right? So parties are just coalitions of people, right? In the Republican coalition, there are a lot of people who they hate gerrymandering because the Democrats did it, but they love it because the Republicans did it. And they're never going to change that. And no matter whatever happens, I think Democrats will take power in North Carolina at some point in the future, and then they're going to cry about it. In the Democratic coalition, I don't think you can get away with that.
Yeah.
I think that
we're too neurotic.
Speaking for personally, I don't want them to gerrymander. I want them to pass independent redistricting, reform. I want them to do exactly what Michigan did.
Yeah, pass it after they gerrymander.
Well, there's some questions about the timing, because you actually have to you have to seat a legislature and then pass a constitutional amendment, and that's going to take another election cycle to actually put in place all that sort of stuff. You can get into that, but the point being, I want them to put in place an independent commission to do this, to take North Carolina off the table, and because what I think would happen if you had fair elections in North Carolina, I think Democrats would win. And what you've seen happen, so in Virginia, for example, so Democrats win the legislature there in 2019 for the first time, I think in 24 years, 25 years, whatever it was. And the very first thing they did was pass the independent redistricting commission. Now,
rather than gerrymander.
Rather than gerrymander the maps. And I don't think Virginia's system is very good, but any system is basically better than the politicians themselves drawing their own maps. Sure. And what that whole messy process came out with was basically what they, the same sort of destination they had in Michigan, which is that neither party likes the map. Mm-hmm. No one likes the map, but it's pretty fair. And both sides basically said, this is a fair map, we can deal with this. The same thing happened in Wisconsin. They finally redrew a fairer map that neither party likes. The Republicans actually won a majority. They didn't win a supermajority, but they were forced to fight in fair districts. And I think that today, if you had fair districts in North Carolina, 60% of the legislature retires overnight because they don't have the juice for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true. I'm also sympathetic to what you're describing because it's going to take so much time and effort to rebuild, and
yes.
It's so much easier to destroy bridges than it is to build them.
Yeah.
So I'm sympathetic to that,
especially when there's going to be a lot of new legislatures, and then
for sure
2 years. After 6 months, you got to start campaigning again.
So my thinking here is just that, like maybe if it was just, Jeff Jackson's all the way down running the show, it'd be a different story. But like, folks on our side are just as susceptible to the second and third order effects of gerrymandering in terms of the corruption, in terms, Democrats can't be bought. Look at New York City, right? So like
I'm with it.
I just see it as a cycle of suffering and as just a really vicious cycle.
It's about voter accountability. Voter accountability is how you stop that from happening. Voter accountability will not mean that no one is corrupt, but it will mean that people there is sunlight.
Yeah, there are exit ramps.
Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and if you make people accountable to voters, they're going to be eventually, in the long run, more honest. And if you give voters the ability to throw out the people that throw the bums out if they're not performing, then that gets you in a better place.
Can we pivot real quick to there are a couple other topics you sent us some notes, and I really want to make sure I get to a couple of these because some of them really stood out to me as fascinating. One of them is well, I guess this is kind of about 2024 in general, but let's just touch briefly on Biden and Trump.
Yeah.
Biden, go.
I think you look at the Biden presidency, and if you are, you have to separate Biden as the president from Biden as the presidency, right? Under the Biden presidency, you look at the numbers, you run down them. It was a very successful presidency, all right? The guy has 16 consecutive quarters of economic growth. He gets unemployment down to 4% and keeps it there most of his presidency. He gets us out of COVID.
Yep.
He gets us out of Afghanistan. It was messy, but he got us out of Afghanistan.
GDP's growing.
GDP is growing. I mean, things are going pretty well. Interest rates are low. I mean, you know, like the Biden years were okay. The inflation stuff was tough. You know, that spiked. They passed the Inflation Reduction Act, and it crashed.
Any conservative listener just turned it off. You just said Biden year was okay. You're done.
But look, if you were a Republican, you look at those numbers, and everyone's going like he's going.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you look at all of that, and all that is just true. Now,
If Trump had presided over that, people would be, enshrining him on Mount Rushmore.
like a third, fourth term.
Yeah,
exactly.
sure.
Yeah. Now you have to then you have to look at Biden as a president.
Oof.
And as a president, I think he was a disastrous failure. And the reason I say that is because Joe Biden was completely incapable of communicating anything he did. He wouldn't talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. He didn't talk about the infrastructure law. He didn't talk about CHIPS Act. The major
He didn't come on this podcast.
There,
True
if you
that.
come on the only come on the holler.
It's a golden ticket.
Legislatively, Biden was incredibly successful,
Yeah.
and he was unable to make anyone know about it. And people can bitch about how the media was unfair to him and whatever, and
Sure.
that's probably true. But the American president has one job: it is to communicate with the American people, and he was unable to do that. And I do think his brain is a little iffy.
Sure.
You look at Biden 2016. You look at Biden 2019.
Yeah, they really invented the stutter thing. I mean, I will say that. Like in 2020, it was all like, well, he has a stutter. He's coaching this kid who also has a stutter because he had a stutter. But you look at Biden in 2012 on the stump for Barack.
He's on fire.
He's great.
He's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
He's driving Corvettes and like eating ice cream.
So he's doing all this sort of stuff. He's unable to communicate with the American people. And then he decides, I'm going to run for re-election after basically making a tacit promise to the American people. I'm a transitional candidate. I'm going to win this thing, and I'm out. He basically throws Kamala Harris under a bus with 100 days left with a disastrous debate.
Here you go.
I don't think that book that they wrote is wrong.
Sure.
You're saying the Jake Tapper book?
I'm not saying it was opportunely timed. Right?
That's my issue with it. Is the timing.
I'm not saying I don't think it was wrong, and I think that the Biden people did our nation a disservice.
Yeah.
I think Biden himself was a disastrous candidate. He's why we have Trump today.
When we say the Biden people, we should distinguish because we're not even necessarily talking about the people in his administration, right? We're talking about a very insular group of advisors and family. I mean, I've listened. I haven't read the book, but I've listened to some interviews with Jake Tapper, and it does seem like there was a very insular group of people who were like beyond our government, right? I mean, we're not talking about Jake Sullivan. We're not talking about the leaders of our departments.
Yeah, no Pete Buttigieg.
No, we're talking about Jill, for example. We're talking about people who said, "Oh, sweetie, you've wanted this for 40 years. You're the only one who can do it. Don't give up." And
they were not giving him his own polling data, right? Because he couldn't deal with it. They said like he can't really operate after 4 p.m. Like, and I understand because that team, I'm assuming.
I mean, I can't operate after 4 p.m., so I get it.
Well, I have to add a couple of these.
That's right. That's right.
They felt that like the alternative, and the reason why they did that is they felt that the alternative was, the brink.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what Trump has done. He's brought our country really to the brink of lawless unconstitutionality, which we're living through right now. And so I understand why they did that. I think Kamala Harris would probably be president today if he had just not run for re-election.
Yeah.
If he'd given her a
his
year.
promise.
I think that if they had done an open primary in the normal kind of way, I think
You think she would have won the primary?
I do.
Holy cow!
I do.
Yeah, I actually think you're probably right, and I think from the come back to Tapper, like I haven't read the book, but he said something in an interview that I heard that I thought was just like, yeah, like why don't we? This is just common sense, right? Like when Democrats hold open primaries, Democrats win elections.
Yeah.
Think about the last time we did it in 2008, right? The last time there was an open primary, Democrats blew it out.
I tell you what, like
I mean, there was an open primary in 2016.
There was not an open primary in 2016.
yeah, there was.
Yeah,
I'll take issue. I don't know. I mean, look, I know you guys are not Bernie guys. I was the guy who voted
Bernie
for
just
Bernie.
lost.
I will respectfully disagree. Not that he did not lose. Like, I do think he lost a free and fair election. I don't think anybody was coerced into voting for Hillary Clinton. But I think that was a year in which the writing was on the wall in terms of like an establishment candidate was not going to be to the voters' liking. We had Brexit, I mean, the descendants of Trump, and how well Bernie was doing. That it should have been obvious to anybody that this was the year where we needed to pull an outsider in, somebody who could claim the mantle of an outsider. And instead, we did get what, whether it was or was not, had the optics of a coronation.
I think you're right in the sense that the Clinton family exerted way too much pressure on insiders of the party.
Sure.
And of course, the other problem was that Bernie Sanders just lost primaries. Like, he just can't win primaries within the Democratic coalition, and that's his problem. But to your point, I also agree.
He won a lot of primaries.
He didn't win enough primaries.
No, but
I think primaries are good. So you talk to politicians, going back to North Carolina. You talk to politicians in Raleigh, Democrats, Republicans, doesn't matter. They hate primaries.
Sure.
Politicians hate primaries. I love primaries. I think primaries are
Whoa,
good.
pitch me on that. I want to hear it. Yeah,
primaries are good and healthy for our democracy, especially in a place where, leave gerrymandering out of it, right? We have sorted as a society where you're gonna have a lot of very red areas and a lot of very blue areas where, like, no gerrymandering required. They're just
that way.
It's just gonna be that way. And in that case, I think primaries are a great way to express the will of the voters. And the politicians hate it because, if I've taken all this time out of my life and I've spent all this these resources and whatever to win office, I don't want some upstart challenging my seat, because they really do think of it as their seat.
Oh, sure. And I see in a very heavy red or very blue district, right, that we should have primaries. I like that idea.
Yeah.
But in, let's say, a district like Alamance, like 63 or 64, man, there's no reason the Democrats should be primarying each other to try to win this seat. Like, everybody should just try to find the best candidate. Primaries could find the best candidate, but everybody's so hard to run, right? But it's spending money to get that is just, I don't know, man. I'm indifferent with it.
The flip side of that is that each party, it doesn't matter if you're team red, team blue, they have to be smart. Like, and people hate political parties, but the reality is that political parties exist for a reason. You need an organization, you need financing, you need resources, you need people who will knock doors for you.
That infrastructure is invaluable.
Like, that's what democracy is.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that people who are down with political parties, I understand that. But you do need parties. That's how democracy runs. And there are different ways you could do it. You could do parties, but people do need to be smart. So in your case, like, if there's a close election, maybe the party just needs to be smart about this and run the right person. The Republicans are pretty good about this, about putting their thumb on the scale to recruit the right candidate for the right race and this sort of thing. They've done that very effectively. Tricia Cotham is a great example of that, where they kind of play the long game in doing some of that. The Democrats are not as good at that, mostly because they are a more heterogeneous party. They're less organized. They don't have as many resources, so there aren't as many people on the inside making good choices about that. And you see that in North Carolina. At the national level, you have the Clinton network. That's that really mattered. It doesn't matter anymore. It got broken up.
Yeah.
Right. But and then now, if you're the American president, you have a network like no one else.
Well, speaking of kind of networks breaking up and change over time across political parties, we touched on Biden and Democrats. I want to touch on the Republicans real quick. Yeah. Right. So in 2010, as we said at the outset of this episode, Republicans take control of the General Assembly, and we kind of have the start of the red years, right? Yeah. But even in the past 15 years, the North Carolina Republican Party has changed quite a bit. We go from a kind of a milquetoast, bland country club dad like Dan Forrest as our lieutenant governor to I'm a black Nazi Mark Robinson, right? I mean, true. There's a pretty whoa, like if somebody looking at our state government in 2010, a Republican, let's say, would look at our state government in 2025 and if they hadn't lived the interim, would be like, what am I smoking? Like, this is crazy. What happened there? I mean, is it just Trump? Is it just Trump shows up and everybody?
Trump was a catalyst for conditions that existed prior to Trump, right? So you look at 2011, you have a lot of highly ideological guys who get into office and they begin running their agenda, right? And at that time, you have one big underappreciated difference between now and 2011, 2013, back in the 2010s, is that there were a lot of suburban Republicans at that time. Right?
I'm related. I was related to numerous of them. I don't know if they're Republicans anymore.
Nelson Dollar, Marin Avila, Bob Rucho, Dan Bishop. You had all these.
Who's kind of weird.
Steve Stone. All these guys, Mecklenburg, Wake, whoever else. And they were voting for Republican candidates at that time. And that's why Bob Rucho, for example, very famous. He ran the tax plan that flattened North Carolina's whole tax system down. And by the way, Bob Rucho promised that this is going to usher in an unrivaled era of prosperity because it's all going to trickle down to all of us. And then none of that ever happened, of course. And now we know that a decade later. He's now, by the way, been put on the State Board of Elections.
Excellent.
Oh, hooray.
Yeah, so good for Bob Rucho, I guess.
We love a happy ending.
But what you saw between then...
$60 tip.
And then of course, you had Trump. Trump catalyzed this whole movement of extremism on the right where you had to get on board with Trump and the personality cult or you were left behind. That means today, all of those guys are extinct. Republicans can't get elected anymore in Mecklenburg County or really almost anywhere in Wake unless they rig the maps. So you look at Tricia.
Pat McCrory keeps trying.
Well, Pat McCrory is not he's persona non grata.
But that's my point, right? Is the Republicans from the old guard who try are kind of laughed out of the room.
Well, they would not laugh Pat McCrory out of the room if he ever won an election. The problem is that the Republican base sees Pat McCrory as incredibly weak and feckless because of HB2, and that's what got him. And then he lost.
Yeah.
He lost to Roy Cooper, and that ended his career right there. And so, but you look at so HB2 is actually a good example. So, you back to 2016, the whole...
Just quick, HB2 is the bathroom bill for folks who... Oh, yeah. Because that was how most people know it as the bathroom bill, which said that you have to use the bathroom based on the gender assigned at birth. Lost us a lot of money in North Carolina. The
$3.5 billion.
Billion, yeah, it was in the billions. Yeah. We lost a lot of that in sports too. NBA
NCAA's didn't come in.
NCAA, thank you,
exactly.
NCAA.
Yeah.
I said NCAA.
The big one, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was huge because it was coming to the Greensboro Coliseum and stuff and down in Charlotte, and they just said, fuck you guys.
Yeah.
We're not doing it.
And the reason why that got called back in 2016 was because a bunch of suburban Metro County Republicans said, hey, this is killing my district. I'm losing jobs. I'm losing investment. Representative out in Wilkes County, out in Swain, out in Carteret, they don't give a shit.
Nope.
It doesn't affect them
well,
at
here
all.
in Alamance, I mean, Dennis Riddell was one of the co-sponsors, I believe.
Go.
Yeah, I mean,
didn't affect him at all.
No.
And also they hate trans people. So
Yes,
it works for them. So what Trump did is not only accelerate the extremism in our politics, but also recenter it on cultural issues, right? And they've just run that. It's
sure.
Today we have people talking about ad nauseum about what should be the policy of children's sports with a transgender or whatever, and no one gives a shit about housing,
Right.
or about like tax policy, or about trade or tariffs, right? And that's a problem, right? So then you have people who are gonna they're gonna win on the trans stuff. But then they're going to turn around and pass disastrous economic policy.
But how do you get people to care? So even, I'm trying to tell this story without giving who it is.
Is it me, Quinn?
No, it's not you. It's not you.
It's usually me.
But a friend of mine is Republican.
Yeah.
Has their own business, and we're talking the other day, and he's like, "Man, these I get these made in China, and these tariffs right now are killing me. I'm backlogged. I'm 3-4 weeks late of being able to get stuff." And he's the type of person that that's pissing him off. It's affecting his money.
Yeah.
But he's like, man, I'm glad my daughter doesn't have to have a guy follow her into the bathroom. And
Gulf
he'll
of
vote,
America.
And he'll vote Republican every time because of that.
Yep.
And so I don't know how that changes. How do you? Because I know he cares more about money than I don't want to say he cares more about money than his daughter getting in trouble in the bathroom, which I think we all agree, no matter what party you're on, none of that's cool.
Sure.
But how do you get somebody who talks about it, who acknowledges it, who recognizes these policies suck dick and nobody is going to do anything about it.
I think you have to go. So I know you guys have been. You guys are white Southerners. I'm a white Southerner.
What?
What?
Yeah, sorry. No, you're right. You're right. I mean, look, guilty as charged.
I tell people there are not a lot of people who have, unless you are a Native American, there are not a lot of people in this country who have been in North Carolina and Virginia longer than my family has been.
Yeah.
My grandfather was born in West Jefferson.
Okay, yeah.
Well, actually, before him, we had a generation or two here in Alamance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No way.
No, Carolina Ford, you're not coming up in Alamance. No, this is Hollowtown. No.
We should compare genealogy notes. I'm serious. I would love to. I'd be very curious.
Have you ever been to Elkin?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Reeves
There's
Theater.
Reeves Theater. Yeah.
That's our family.
That's fantastic.
They came down from the New River Valley out of the
You know Rays of Sunshine?
Gale Academy.
Yeah, they're my Rays. Yeah. What don't you know?
Point being, like our roots go deep,
Yeah.
right? So you know your history. White Southerners have never failed to vote against our economic self-interest when it serves your status, right? LBJ very famously acknowledged this in words I'm not going to use here.
Sure.
But he said, like, if you can get a white guy to believe he is better than somebody else, he'll vote for you every time.
I mean, that's the American Civil War, too, right? I mean, because one thing that a lot of lost causers will say correctly is most white Southerners didn't own slaves.
Right.
But what they leave out is that most white Southerners lived in a world where
But
they thought they would become slave owners.
they fought for their right to do so.
Exactly. They 100% did. I mean, and the analogy I use is like, well, yeah, like most, Americans don't own Teslas. That doesn't mean, or most Americans aren't billionaires. But like so many people say, well, I don't want to tax the rich because when I am rich,
Exactly.
Right, that's right.
I don't want to have to.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So I don't think for a lot of people they're just always going to vote on what protects their status identity.
Culture wars.
Yes, there are going to be people who don't. So there are things that break people out of that. Eventually, if your friend loses a business, he goes bankrupt or whatever.
Yeah, now he might get mad.
There are points, and there's people who research around like how do people change their minds. One of the things that changes people's minds is crisis events. So very traumatic events,
like
in
the
your
Great
life.
Depression.
Well, I think that's
level.
that's what happened here in Alamance County, right during Clinton when NAFTA happened. Like there was a lot of
mills.
Southern Democrats, and when they shut down, like these Democrats blamed it on Clinton, blamed it on the Democrats, but it caused them to go completely bankrupt. It wasn't like 3-week backlog being like they lost everything.
Like you're saying, a crisis event.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
COVID. There you go.
Yeah, COVID's a big one.
And that changed that changed a lot of people. It made them look at new issues,
Sure.
and in some cases change their minds. Now, again, partisan polarization is one of the most powerful forces in our society right now.
Crazy.
And so it's really hard to do it. But if it dislodges a couple of those, that's fine. The other big forces are negativity and cynicism and distrust, and those are being accelerated and driven by social media. And just by our culture generally. And I think that's really...
But doesn't all that stuff play well for people on the right?
It does. Exactly. Yeah.
But people are also, and I mean, because we see this, like people also don't want the anger. And I mean, people don't want, people see the polarization. And yes, as susceptible as we are to it, there are so many folks who just are over it and like want something that is...
They're exhausted.
They're exhausted. And they want something that's real. They want information they understand and can do something about. And they don't want to live in a constant state of inflammation.
So in addition to social media, AI is also driving a lot of this stuff, right? It's kind of fun, but people are seeing all this crazy stuff.
We're not talking about AI girlfriend fun.
You're seeing like the thing about like,
It is a thing.
Oh, man.
oh God.
Oh God.
You're seeing like the video of like the dog carrying the baby out of the
Yeah,
flood.
yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever,
Yes.
like,
Right.
and-
Dude, after Helene, I saw some crazy AI images where it was like, there's no way that dude on the four-wheeler carrying
that chick is not preying
Yeah,
on
exactly.
the,
There's no way.
But
no
Meemaw
way.
believes it, and
Oh,
she
it's-
shared it, and it's real.
Society
Makes me sad.
And so, but that's one reason why I think that you guys have been successful. Why projects like what we do on social media can be successful. I think that people are looking for authenticity and people who say what they mean and not what they think people want to hear them say, which is what politicians do, which is why everyone hates politicians. Right. And frankly, I think sometimes the Republicans are a little bit better at saying, like, I don't give a flip what polls well. I'm going to tell you.
The first time Blair Reeves holds back the F word, I like it. 59 minutes in, and now he doesn't give a flip.
It's a family-friendly podcast.
That's right.
They've already picked their kids up in the school line. This is great.
But I think that's one reason why you guys are doing, and what we do, and a lot of other content creators on social media. The reason why some of them are successful is because I think that people are looking for that. They're looking for people who are like, you could AI this, but it'd be really hard, right? You couldn't do it long term.
Sure.
People know like this is a real thing that's like actually happening, right?
Yeah. So I hear you. I hear you both. You talked about people who are tired of being inflamed, and another example, I'll bring it back to Alamance County, our commissioners in our budget that we're dealing with right now. Yeah. We have one commissioner who was a Republican. She just switched her party to unaffiliated. And a lot of Republicans are wanting our schools to be better here, are wanting to keep our libraries, are wanting to keep our emergency rescue units. Those were all on the chopping block. But I be damned if they're going to vote for a Democrat to stop this. They're going to bitch, but they're not going to vote for it.
Would 5% vote for a Democrat?
We had an opportunity last time, and they knew this was going to happen. And I don't know if it takes two cycles to do it.
You say that we had an opportunity, but the person you're referencing who's just switched unaffiliated, it was the top vote getter.
Right, but the person that, Anthony Pierce could have been elected Democrat, and he was shot down on the list.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm an optimist or a pessimist. Like, I have no idea. Like, the future is wide open, right? But I think, look, all it takes, I mean, was it 600 votes got us an Allison Riggs over a Jefferson Griffin? Like,
That's right.
These margins are razor thin.
I'm going to be a pessimist here and think, we're not flipping votes. What's going to happen is we're going to need enough Republicans to get discouraged, and they're not going to vote for a Democrat, but they're just not going to vote for that Republican, and that's how it's going to happen.
Like half
six one way, half a dozen the other, man.
Like half of voters or whatever it is, like don't vote. Like in this last election, I think like 30% of voters didn't vote or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that percentage is pretty high, and it wavers. Right.
Yeah.
Look,
and a 2% change in that makes all the difference.
If we lived in like Arkansas or Tennessee, I'd say we're done. Right,
Yeah.
right. Like they're gonna run everything. And I'll even say like people overestimate. Like I have like political opinions, right? Like, but like I'm not like a diehard partisan.
Right.
Like, is there a world in which I vote red? Probably. I don't know what a lot of things have to change.
Sure. But if we're being intellectually honest, right?
Like stuffed waffles at Waffle House.
Oh, fuck that. Like, yeah, you could imagine a world, right?
For sure.
I think that the problem is when people make their political partisanship their whole personality, and they put that in front of their principles. If your principles guide your partisanship, that's fine.
Sure.
If your partisanship drives your principles, then you've got all topsy-turvy.
I'm with you.
And that's what a lot of people have done.
Well, Blair, this has been a really fun hang. Thanks for coming back on the Holler. We're coming up on time, so just want to say thanks. Folks can find you, obviously, at Carolina Forward on all the socials, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. You guys have a great website. For folks who just want to kind of dip their toe in, your social content is great, but also for like the policy wonks, you guys have some really great papers on everything from...
We're coming out with more. We're coming out with one on childcare policy.
Awesome.
We're doing one with the 2040 vision for North Carolina.
Cool.
We're doing some more of those as well, so more to come.
And sign up for their newsletter. They don't spam you. I always like getting it. Gives me some blogs and lets me know kind of what's happening around.
Yeah, Carolina Forward newsletter is great. You know, it's also a good one.
Hometown Holler.
Hometown Holler newsletter is pretty good too.
Yeah,
hate to double plug, but like it's...
there's no double plug here. I mean, it's the plug.
That's right. So if you haven't already, follow us on. Well, honestly, go to our Substack. Our Substack's been a fan favorite recently. Really excellent content there, and then obviously the other socials and. join us on Patreon, please. We got some really cool stuff coming out. You can get early access to it. I have a Intro to North Carolina Civics YouTube series coming out, and the patrons.
I've seen it. It's amazing.
Blair and Quinn have both had sneak peeks, and I'm really excited about it. So you can get early access by becoming a patron. So go ahead and do that. And we have a shirt for you.
We
Blair.
do. We got a nice shirt for him. I can't believe he doesn't
something
have
like
one.
this.
It's never real until you get a t-shirt.
That's
right.
And if you've made it this far, here is your secret treasure. I think we're going to drop the news, Daniel.
All right, let's do it.
Drop the
Let's
news.
pitch it.
We've got Governor Stein. He's coming to the studio, and so we will have him. He'll be our season finale. He's coming in, and
You guys really did an upgrade.
yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah.
That Governor Stein is going to come to Alamance County, sit where Mr. Blair Reeves is sitting, and have a conversation with us at the Holler.
It's gonna be a lot of fun.
That's so hot.
Yeah, and honestly, maybe I'm just not that we'll necessarily use them, but message us if you got questions for the governor. I'm kind of
Oh,
curious
that
what
would be
folks,
cool.
what folks want to know about the governor and what he's doing. Just
Yeah, if you've made it this far, I'll definitely listen to your questions.
I don't know if I will, but I mean, I will, but like no promises is what I'm saying. Anyway,
I'm hyped.
Blair, thanks again, man. This is a lot of fun.
Cheers.
Appreciate you guys.